So 1, 2, 3. There it goes. All right. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today. Shall we begin with a little bit a round of introductions? Maybe you can tell us what's your current role or job title and what does it mean?
Sure. So my name is Jeff Goumas, and I am based in the United States in Chicago. I work for an organization called World Education, and we are an international NGO that focuses on equity through education. And in my role in our US group, my focus is on the use of educational technologies within the adult education field. So when we define adult education, at least in the work that we currently do, as anyone who has educational barriers to being able to pursue education and or pursue employment or pursue any of their life pursuits. So a large focus of that in the US is English speakers of other languages, people who have never completed their high school or secondary work within their initial K-12 education, and anyone in between. And that range of people is expanding as technology changes the skills that are needed. And so a lot of our work is in actually the use of digital technologies and the skills that are needed for one to be successful. So that includes both those who are teaching and those who are learning. So I do a lot of professional development, working with teachers on how to leverage technology while developing the skills that learners need in order to be able to use technology in their life and work in finance and health. Um, and then I also lead our open education initiative. And so, as I mentioned, my focus is adult education. And while it is a large swath of people who require this education, it's heavily underfunded. And so I started working in open education for adult education because there was a recognized need that there is a lack of resources that are targeted at individuals who may be at a third grade reading level, but they don't want to be reading content that is designed for a 7-year-old. And so the open education focus is really on finding resources that can be appropriate for adult education students and making it easier for adult educators and adult learners to be able to locate and use those resources based on the skills that they need. And so that sorry, I lost my train of thought there. That work in particular is the area where artificial intelligence and generative AI is interesting to me because of the fact that we know that those resources are not being created, and we know that there is a tool that could potentially support the generation of those resources, that the contextualization of materials so that they are appropriate for adult education students. And then combining those two, just because there's open content does not mean that teachers necessarily know how to effectively use that or the technologies that are used to either create that content or disseminate that content. And so a lot of my professional development work is the intersection of both understanding how to use these technologies, understanding the skills that teachers and learners need in order to use the technologies, and then using that to also generate content and support expanding the availability of content within adult education. So that is my
Awesome.
role.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's going to help us situate this conversation. And as we are talking about AI and generative AI, I'd like to start off with what do you call AI or artificial intelligence? What does that mean to you?
To me, it means any any digital technology that is basically taking human inputs and making sense of human inputs over a number of inputs to support decision making or correction or suggesting things for somebody based on a massive data set that a human brain could not possibly pull together themselves. So I think of it as anything as basic as when I'm typing in a Gmail and it's suggesting the next word because it's making assumptions or auto correcting, or in a spreadsheet when it's assuming that this is the set of calculations that you want to do and making that suggestion. I think it is those types of technologies. It's even recommender engines have some level of artificial intelligence where it's making sense of large amounts of data to present something that is an assumption of what it is you are looking for based on the inputs that you are providing in that moment.
Okay, interesting. So just to clarify a bit about the boundaries of this, let's say, what about a traffic light where pedestrians have to press a button for it to turn green? Here, I guess there isn't a large amount of data it's processing, so that wouldn't be AI then.
Correct.
And what about on the other end, something that processes a large amount of data like a weather forecasting station, but doesn't necessarily have human inputs? What about that?
So I would consider that to be AI as well.
Hmm.
So maybe it's not human inputs per se. I guess it's any inputs that it's being able to process those and make sense of that data. I mean, yes. So obviously humans aren't inputting, say, what's being captured by satellites related to traffic, so that Google Maps can inform you of what traffic patterns might be at a certain time of day. So I guess, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. It would be any input. I'm thinking of it, I guess, from the recipient of the AI now in terms of what I want to maybe know or see or do. Um, that it is the generation of what's coming out of AI, I guess, for me in a moment. So
Hmm. Okay. All right. And then on the other end, you also mentioned that you lead the initiative in your organization on open education. So out of that, what does the open part mean to you in that context?
So, from the very basic level, I think for me, it is helping educators first and foremost understanding fair use and open and licensing of content as it exists out in the world, and that obviously is AI aside, that has been a challenge for many people in terms of recognizing what they can or cannot do with content that is presented to them in a digital format where they have tools at their disposal to be able to copy and paste. So those two very powerful tools that we have has made it so that the lines of content ownership, content licensing have been blurred significantly. So again, AI aside, where we have had like rules in place around um, content licensing and what you can do with it, we see lots of violations of those rules. So first and foremost, in my capacity, we try to help people understand what fair use means. We help people understand what Creative Commons licensing means in terms of when looking at and potentially using content that they find online. But given that a huge part of my role is to support educators and generation of open content, it's also on the other side of that, considering the works that you create and doing so in a way that you actually are entitled to give it a Creative Commons license. That means that others can do as they wish with the content that you've created, all for the service of increasing the amount of content that is available to educators and learners. And back to where I'm coming from, in a field, adult education, where there is a lack of content. So a lot of my work is just both on understanding ethical use of reuse of those things, content that people have created, and then considerations around the content that you actually put out as an educator.
Hmm. So there's a few aspects that go into it. You mentioned licensing. And you've also mentioned before that there are lots of tools, but people don't necessarily know how to use them. Um, so, what would you say is the connection here with openness?
I think if you so basic level, not education related, but say just presentation software, PowerPoint and Google Slides, right? These are tools that allow us to present content. And oftentimes, if you don't want to be a very boring presenter, you might want graphics. And so, just even in that basic thing, for the 2.5 decades, 3 decades, I guess now that I've been seeing people presenting using PowerPoint and Google Slides, the number of times you see things on slides that it's like, I don't believe you have permission to use that, is still quite expansive. And so it's more about understanding, but not the tool itself, but the content that you're actually pushing out via something that you're providing for a student, whether it is a slide deck, whether it's a document, whether it's a course in a learning management system. Do you have the right to be using that content? And again, so that gets into the fair use. There's different rules for if you're sharing things in educational settings with just your students, as opposed to some of the work that we're doing. We're asking educators to publish out to the world. And so it's understanding both how to create learning assets using these technologies, but more importantly, the content that you're putting into those learning assets, particularly if you're sharing them out. What are the considerations that you need to make around the openness of the content?
Mhm. So it's a lot about permissions from one side, and on the other side, for users, I guess, about being open about where it is that they got content from and whether they have permission to use it.
Yes.
Hmm. Okay. And now, referring back to your definition about AI as tools that process large data sets and can update with data inputs, and open education about permission to use things, what comes to mind as openness in the context of AI in education?
So, to me, where my focus has been from the instructional standpoint and from the content standpoint. Again, in my role of working in a field where there's a lack of appropriate content for this learning population. So, to me, the intersection here is that this tool presents an exciting opportunity, or AI presents an exciting opportunity to be able to draw from open content, and to be able to generate content and contextualize content so that it is appropriate for the audience that it is serving. In some cases, that is the age of the learner in relation to the skills that they are developing. In some cases, that's the cultural contextualization. I've done a couple projects now that work in international environments. And so there's another layer of contextualization, and that is, do these materials, do these scenarios and these materials represent my experience as somebody from another country? Which oftentimes they don't. They're very much generated by certain populations, and it's hard to see oneself in those things. So I feel like we there's a lot of opportunity for content generation that is contextually and culturally appropriate for the learners that are to benefit from it, where this is something that has not been addressed for quite some time, although it's a known need. And the biggest reason for that is the cost of content generation and the benefit to a publisher to actually create that content. Because if it's not a large market, they're not going to produce materials for that market. And so I think it fills a very necessary gap to have more inclusive materials for learners.
Hmm. Interesting. I guess that kind of raises some points about inclusivity, about appropriateness, and that ties into openness somehow as well. Can you think of any examples? You mentioned in this project you use several AI tools. Would you call any of them open?
Um, I I that's it's the thing that I still am grappling with, I guess. They're very open in the sense that there's content that you can use, but they're also very closed in knowing where that content is coming from. And I do think that is an important part of the equation, and that in part is one of the challenges that I think we all are trying to figure out, is not knowing where this content is being drawn from. That like moving the next step to that is obviously the human layer of being able to evaluate that and being able to make sure that it truly is appropriate, say, for the context. And that's something that also is a challenge. But I do struggle with sort of not knowing where the initial content is coming from, and from that standpoint, how can I say that the output is open if I don't know what the input was?
Mhm.
I don't necessarily have a firm answer for you on that question, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. It ties into what you mentioned before about people, say, using various graphics in their presentations. And if they don't necessarily share where they got something from, I see a parallel here where AI outputs might not similarly also not say where their outputs came from.
Mhm.
So I guess at least a part or an aspect of openness is about provenance. Like, where did the content come from? And then earlier we discussed a bit about licensing and permission to use that content as well. Mhm. But suppose now we go a little bit into hypothesis land. And suppose we have an image generation tool that produces graphics for your PowerPoint slides. And it finds you an image and tells you exactly where it came from. Would such a tool then be open? Or what else? Like, is that all of openness, I guess?
Just because it's saying where it comes from, I guess the part of that is who created where it's coming from, and did they give such permission? Because that just be I could say, here is something that I picked up from a copyrighted source that did not give me permission to do so. That certainly does not make the product that I've now generated open. And so I think it's a step in terms of knowing where the both graphical content or textual content is coming from. I think that's an important step in terms of just the awareness of the person who's now remixing or using that content in some other way. Um, but it really is an exchange, right, between content producers and the recipients of those content, and then in between the generator of that, which is AI. And I don't necessarily know what that looks like. One of the things that I, in prepping for this, was just kind of thinking about is I don't know if there's any data out there in terms of people's willingness, content creators who are true content creators who are doing so as a means of living, for example, if there's less willingness or more barriers that they're trying to be put in place in terms of the way that they're putting content out there out of fear of whatever they create being, manipulated by generative AI. And so I think there's really three entities in here. It's the tools themselves are sort of the intermediary, and then it's the people who are creating content and giving allowances for those tools to be leveraging their intellectual works. And then there's the recipients of that who are benefiting from and asking or using these tools in order to um, get an output that fits a need. The image example is a great one because it's something that I do use when I'm doing presentations, because oftentimes it's like I want something that's evocative and nuanced that I know does not exist out there at all. I was trying to do an image of a superhero because, like, one of the things I've heard people say is, "Oh, you're now a superhero. You can do anything." And so I was trying to find a superhero image with like a chest instead of like a Superman, but like mobile app, like an app screen, to just combine like superhero person plus like technology. I know that doesn't exist. I know I would just spend the rest of my days looking for that, but I could go into Dolly and get that. And so that's not. I don't know if that's open because I'm going with it as a recipient because I want that image. But I am not necessarily in that moment thinking about where it's coming from. So it's a very challenging situation because these tools now exist, and it's so enticing to want to use them. And I feel like at times, even for myself, I'm pushing aside my my thoughts and my philosophies on open because I'm able to get what I want. Um, I don't think that was a ramble, but it's I think it's a challenging space because I don't know that I think with any of these technologies, any thoughts, barriers, philosophies we have get diminished when we see the ease with which it benefits us. You know, so many people are very willing. I have people in my building. I live in a flat, and there's Amazon packages all the time in the lobby. And I know most of them, if they were asked about like big corporations, they'd be, oh, they're terrible, and about climate, oh, that's terrible, and not like associating the fact that the convenience that you are getting based on this service is diametrically opposed to the opinions that you're saying in a conversation at dinner.
Uh-huh. I really love this image that you shared of like there it tool being just a mediator between the content creator and content user. And I guess then openness really is about a clear communication about what's okay and what's not okay between the creator and the user. Hmm.
And I don't think the tools are doing that appropriately or effectively right now, at least the ones that I have experience with.
I see. Hmm. Now, in a future world where tools are more open, or I guess it's not really the tool itself that's open, since you mentioned it's part of the communication, but tools are better mediators of open, uh, then how would you perceive the role of such open AI tools in enhancing education?
So again, most of my work is coming from the practitioner side. So I think on the one hand, I think it benefits instructors in terms of being able to individualize and personalize learning for students. So one of the things that we are actively doing actually right now is working with teachers to understand that you could relevel content. So, say it was a reading passage, and you wanted to lower the readability index so that someone who is at an earlier level could actually benefit from the content that they can. Um, that's something that a tool like AI could do. Right now, it's a manual process that a teacher might be doing. I assume there will be tools out there that do that more effectively in an automated way. Because one of the concerns I have with this is just because this technology allows a teacher to do that doesn't mean it's the teacher's job to do that all of the time. I want teachers to be teaching, and not be content creators. But I do think it allows for that. It allows for more personalization of both just the content itself, whether that be because it's culturally being culturally inclusive, being age inclusive, in the case of adult education. Um, so that's a big area. I also think, with any technology, I really try to look at thinking through what is the benefit of this to me. Um, how does it make me more efficient, and how can it make me more effective in what it is that I am supposed to be doing, as opposed to adding to what it is I'm doing. But so that's something that I really take to heart. So things such as insights into learner understanding for a large group of students. I do see a huge value, and I mean, I know there's tools that are already doing that, but I think we can make even more informed insights in terms of where learners might be struggling. And so I'm interested in seeing more tools that are leveraging that more effectively. Um, to me, anything that AI can do to alleviate processes for an educator that are taking away from their time of actually working the human part of learning, I see as being very exciting. So the data collection, the data analysis, the contextualization of content to make sure that it's appropriate for a learner, and that personalization, I I see those as huge benefits. In the service, though, of that teacher being able to spend more personalized time with the learner, and supporting the learners in the process of getting to where they need to be, because every learner is different, particularly in an adult education setting.
Uh-huh. Right. And actually, on that note, in your work so far, have you encountered any challenges in implementing OpenAI in education?
We haven't done extensive work in terms of um, the professional development that we're doing. We are doing a lot, and I know you're talking to my colleague who is really leading our AI initiative. Um, we've done experimental work, if you will, in terms of just understanding what do practitioners want to do. Let them play to get some insights in terms of how this could benefit them in their work. Um, we are about to do a structured um, professional development initiative that focuses on creating standards aligned content. And I do think it'll be interesting to see what challenges emerge from that in terms of um, both prompting and getting quality actual materials out of it. Um, I do think there's a challenge of what our level of um, being discriminate, I guess, in terms of what constitutes quality content, um, could be diminished a bit, because of the ease with which these things produce materials. I was on a panel 2 days ago about AI, and the moderator just like decided to demonstrate, look, I can create a lesson plan. Look how fast I could do that, and it's done. And it's like, no, it's not done. um, it's not even the start. So I do think I think in particular the challenges to me are around how do we impart the importance of the human layer of evaluation of what comes out of it, and the quality control. I think that comes out of, particularly when we're talking about instructional resource generation, because I think it's very easy to see an output and that just saved me a lot of time, and this is good, let's go with it. and is it pedagogically sound? Is it actually doing what it is you want it to do in the most effective way? Um, and so I think that part of seeing how you take it, refine it through the tool, perhaps through additional prompting and threading, but then ultimately the process of taking it from initial output to finished product and making sure that that is quality and effective, I think will be a challenge. But it's one that we're trying to solve through working with educators in this process.
Mhm. So there's really quite a lot of, I guess, critical thinking involved in when to use it and whether to use it. And then finally, if you do decide to use it, whether the outputs are good enough to use, or does this something need to be worked further?
Yeah, I mean, similar to the work that I know you were doing, it's we already are not good at doing Google searches when we're given a list of options or things that come out based on what it is we are looking for. Being good evaluators and vetters of the answers that we get in a search engine where we are given options. So now you have these tools that are giving you what appears to be a very definitive um, response to something. And so, like, the where is lateral reading in that world? Where okay, this is an output, but I need to. Where's the second opinion that one might want? And so I do think that that information, the critical thinking aspect, the evaluating information aspect, the information literacy aspect of this for educators and for learners, I think will be one of the biggest challenges because I don't think we as a species have been good at it so far. I mean, in the World Wide Web, which is also open, right? I mean, that's the whole point is open content. But we are at least being asked to be the person who makes the final decision on what we want to use or base our opinions or thoughts on.
Hmm. That's really interesting. I'm aware of the time. I know that our set meeting is about to end in a couple of minutes. Do you have to run, or do you still have 5 minutes?
I have 5 minutes.
Okay, cool. In that case, I'd like to ask you about potential risks. We talked about challenges, but now, if, say, the challenges can be addressed, do you see any risks associated with the use of OpenAI in education?
I think with any technology, we have to be aware of the fact that there are going to be skills of our own, like our skills that we possess now, that will atrophy a bit. The example I'll kind of always give is I used to be very, very good at like knowing where I am and knowing how to get from one point to another and just paying attention, especially if I'm in a new place. And now I just turn on my phone and follow the blue dot. And oh, I'm going the wrong way. Let me go this way. So just my navigation skills in the world have atrophied because I know I'm always going to have something that tells me where to go in real time with a maps application. And so there's a whole host of things that I've offloaded. One being just preparing in advance and like seeing where is my hotel, say if I'm going to a city, or how am I getting there, or printing out a map. And fortunately, that hasn't put me in a situation of danger where I'm in a situation where I don't have this thing in front of me and I need to get somewhere. So I think that's not a risk, but like I guess it's we need to be mindful of the things that we are willing to let go of as we embrace and acknowledge that AI can do many of these tasks for us. Um, I brought up data analysis, and so yes, it can process data obviously faster than us, but there's benefit to sifting through data too. Like there are human insights that are made in that process or just actual like um, conclusions that are drawn or connections that are made that I think we lose if we're entirely reliant on the technology to do so. Um, my other fear, which is not AI specific, I think it's with any technology, and I mentioned this earlier, is in the education space at least. Having this tool does not, we take a technology, it allows somebody to do something more efficiently, and it allows somebody to maybe even do something that they weren't skilled at before. Um, like I can, yes, use image generation tools to generate images. I'm not an artist. Um, my fear is that, as we see in any workplace, that if you have a technology that allows anyone to do this thing, then now it's part of your job to do this thing. So, I am not a marketer, but I can use MailChimp. That doesn't mean that I should be responsible for doing newsletters when my job is teacher professional developer. Um, we can use Asana, which is software that supports project management. So anyone can manage a project in this technology. That does not make me a project manager. And so in the education space, I do think it's a kind of task concern in terms of what additional burdens are going to be put on a teacher because of the fact that they have technologies that allow them to do more things. And again, I was just on a panel where someone just made the statement, "You're now superhuman." And so I fear the sort of siphoning away of teachers' time and energy from actually working with learners because of the fact there's technology that is such a Swiss Army knife of things that they can now do and produce. And then I guess in terms of the, you know, ethical and inclusivity aspect of what I was saying earlier, um, I I recognize that on the one hand, I think we can benefit from artificial intelligence helping create a world where there's more inclusive content for different populations. But I also recognize that that's only as good as the inputs that are coming in. And so I don't know what the solve is for that, but I think a concern is the oversight of what is actually getting put out there in the world. Um, the less rigorous the review of content is, and again, as educators might be more responsible for generating things that they're using with learners. I've definitely been in classrooms where I'm seeing just not good information being shared by a teacher. So if this added burden is being put on teachers to be the purveyors of content, to be the purveyors of skill-based instruction in particular, I do worry that, again, that's more onus being put on the teacher for one, but just the quality of learning content that is being put in front of students is a concern, whether it's factually correct, whether it is culturally correct and competent. I think there's less layers of oversight, I guess, when we're just leaving it to the technology to produce these things. So I think that's a really concern of mine that I think obviously comes into the evaluation aspect of anything when we're doing and using AI. And the third thing to me is the information literacy aspect, like full stop. I see people at a party pull up, Chat GPT and ask it a question, and it really is wild that it is just the first thing that comes out is accepted as the thing that is the answer to the question that is being asked. And I know it will get more correct over time as there's more inputs, but I do believe that we are not very good at information literacy wholesale. And I don't think that's going to improve with a technology that seems so definitive in what it creates. And I live in the US, and we are in a period of time right now where we are seeing the effects of information literacy within a presidential election. And that's a big concern for me, because, we now see people looking at videos of them doing things and saying, well, that's not, no, I didn't do that. And even though there's actual video of them doing it, I was watching a documentary on January 6th last night, and it was, but here you are doing this, and no, I'm not. And so just, I'm very concerned of that, the critical layer of just thinking about what it is you're seeing, because it allows for the propagation of content based on the volume of inputs that are coming in. And again, in those inclusive areas, there's not a lot of inputs coming in. So how can we expect the materials that come out to be thoughtful and inclusive? And so the human layer of evaluating and mitigating content, to me, is something I don't know that we're prepared for. And so that's a big concern of mine.
Yeah. And I guess these aspects are also really relating to this next point of what are the particular barriers or obstacles that need to be addressed to achieve greater openness in AI. And there's a lot. I guess the phrase with great power comes great responsibility keeps coming to my mind.
Yeah.
As our power increases with new technologies, our responsibilities do too. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. As we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add or discuss regarding the use and future of open AI technologies that we haven't covered?
No, I don't think there's there's anything more. I guess it's just, what I do believe and what we are embracing in our work is just being open in our experimentation and use of it, and really providing people with opportunities to question, and discuss it, in an open environment, I think is a really important part of our work. Our work as an organization that is, again, focused on helping teachers leverage technology within their classrooms, and with their learners. And so I think I just want to make sure that we are, as a society, just really being critical of it. I think it's just been very interesting few years ago when there was the leaks of data from Facebook and Instagram about the negative impact it was having on children and teens. It's like that should not be a surprise, to us. And so the problem with any technology is we just rush to embrace it because it's a shiny thing without thinking of the implications. I think there's been obviously a lot more conversation around AI. I think at the outset, than with any other thing that I can think of in recent history. And I'm guess hopeful that, as long as those critiques and critical conversations are happening, we can continue to make sure we're being responsible in its use. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, to kind of gain these insights and share them out with others.
Thank you. And thank you for your time. It's been a great discussion opportunity. And I really look forward to putting together all the thoughts from different people as we discuss meanings of openness in AI.
Yeah, seems
All
like a
right.
great project. Are we done recording?
We are. I'm going to stop the recording now.